Cody. Oh, thank you, buddy. This is Kody, and this is Kody's Roadmap to Success. And we have another dog named Wally in the house as well, but Wally's outside right now playing, and he's an elderly dog, and this is the dog we really worked with for most of the session. So he had a bad incident with he really has started to act aggressively towards submissive dogs or injured dogs. And in the dog world, and really animal world in general, animals don't really like to show that they're injured because that makes them target, because animals eat other animals. They might be lunch. So basically, when a dog feels injured, they just start acting differently usually. And some dogs will act more aggressive if they see a dog that is injured, and that's kind of what was going on with him. So we'll probably end up setting a follow-up session to do some BAT or behavior adjustment training, where we teach him how to be calm around other dogs and then help him practice it by creating a stage scenario where we have another dog that we control, so we can control the distance and the movement and all that fun stuff and really put him in a position to succeed. Sit. All right, but before we get there, I really covered in the first session, I cover a lot of the common mistakes that people make that often contribute to these dog behavior problems. A lot of dogs get confused in thinking that they need to protect or be possessive of their humans because the humans are so loving to the dog that we don't provide them with the structure that they need, and so the dog gets confused in thinking that it is in charge. But we don't listen to the dog, which stresses the dog out. I'm not listening, I am listening to you, but I'm just not giving you the treat. But that causes the dog to be stressed, and then that dog, just like us, when we're stressed out, we're more apt to make mistakes, to say the wrong thing. Mistakes can happen. It's important to understand when it comes to dog, excited is not happy. It can be excited and happy, but those are different things. And a lot of us get our dogs so excited because we think that that's happy, but they're actually not in a controlled or a calm and balanced state of mind, and they're going to make mistakes. So this session, we really talked about adding some structure. The Guardians already had one rule in place, not being allowed in the furniture. But we were feeding the dog from the table. The dogs were eating at the same time. I usually like to feed them one at a time. Also, we were sometimes giving food from the table to the dogs, which is very confusing for dogs. And sometimes we tend to think of breaking a rule as being nice, but for dogs, it's really confusing. Dogs need consistency. They learn through consistency, repetition, and good timing. You have 3 seconds to correct or reward your dog, bless you, in order for the dog to understand what it is that we're doing, but it has to be repeated over and over and over again. So if we tell the dog, no, you're not on the couch, no, you're not on the couch, and for a month we say, no, you're not on the couch, and then we're like, you know what, Kody, you've been so good, why don't you come up on the couch? Kody's like, I was never going to ask to be on the couch, and now you invited me up, so now can I or can't I? I don't know, so I'm going to keep on probing and trying and asking. So we really, when we enforce new rules, we want to keep them consistently enforced for a minimum of 30 days, if not longer. Really as long as the problem's going on. So he's not already allowed on the furniture, which is great, but we talked about some other rules, like he has to sit. Actually, both dogs have to sit before we let them out the door. But we're only going to say it once. The more you say it, the less you mean it. What's his word for it? Is it down or crash or chill?
We're going to say crash.
Crash. So every time your dog does something, within 3 seconds, pet it and say the command word, like crash. That's passive training, which we'll talk about in a minute. So some of the rules we went over. Have to sit before I let the dog in or out of a door. So I go to the door and I say sit once and tell him don't ask. If he doesn't sit within 3 seconds, I walk away, sit down somewhere, pull out my phone, pull out a book, read a little bit, do something, but do it while you're seated. And ask your mom to give you a 60-second timer. And after 60 seconds, you go back to the door and tell him again, sit. And if in 3 seconds he doesn't sit, I walk away for 2 minutes. Next I walk away for 4 minutes, then for 8 minutes. And if I go and say sit, and Wally sits, and my buddy here, Kody, does not, then I'd let Wally out the door, and I wouldn't let Kody out. And as soon as I go to the door and say sit, and he sits, boom, that door flies open like it's on magic. And after a while, he'll go sit at the door as his way of saying, I'd like to go outside. I would also recommend that when you guys are walking him, make him sit before you cross the street. Every once in a while, make him sit for no apparent reason on a walk. That's really helpful. Also on walks, this is a little bit well, I'm just going to get to it while I'm thinking about it. One of the Guardians mentioned that he likes to let the dog sniff, but doesn't want to sniff too much. So what I do on a walk is I like to keep the dog next to me. If the dog is in front of you and it's reactive or aggressive, it will be more active or aggressive because it thinks it's literally leading you. So if I'm on a walk, every block I stop someplace wherever I decide, and I say, you know what, Kody, you can sniff. I say free or sniffing, or whatever the word is that you want, and then I loosen up the leash, let him have more room, and then he can walk around and he can sniff wherever he wants for 1 minute. Then we go back to walking with a short leash next to me until we get to the next block, and then somewhere on that block I give him a little bit of time. So this is kind of the equivalent of if you eat your meat, you get a little dessert. So he has to earn those free times. But not letting a dog sniff on a walk would be is very frustrating for dogs, and after a while they won't want to go for a walk. So make sure you do that. All right, so we also talked about exercise. The dogs get plenty of exercise. I was actually concerned it might be a little bit too much because there's some great dog walkers that take good care of these dogs, and they do a pack walk. But it's a little bit of a longer walk, and being cockers are not super high energy dog. At first they told me it was a 4-hour walk. I'm like, that's way too long for a cocker. But for an hour, hour and a half is okay. But dogs sleep 17 hours a day, so actually sprinkling the exercise throughout the day in little 5 or 10 minute segments is much better. If he likes to play fetch, playing fetch. We have a nice long house here in Santa Monica, and we can throw the ball back and forth. And exercising him before taking him for a walk can really set him up to succeed. Also before the dog walkers. Now, for the dog walkers, they're going to pick him up. He's got a van, and he's going to go pick up a whole bunch of other dogs before they go on the walk. So giving him that exercise, he's probably not going to start walking until about an hour after he leaves here. So we get him 10 minutes of fetching exercise. He goes in there, he cools down, and he pants, and then he meets all the other dogs. And then when they're ready for the walk, he's slept a little bit, recharges batteries, he's ready to go. Okay, so other rules that we talked about: not being allowed to be within 7 feet of anyone who's eating. Now, we have children in the house. One of them is doing a great job of filming right now. And she's almost as smart as she is beautiful. And so what we would do is have the kids practice having a snack on the couch. And then mom or dad can establish an invisible boundary 7 feet away from the couch using the escalating consequences that we talked about, that we highlighted in the leadership exercise video above. Hey, buddy. And that way the dog practices. Just because the humans have food and I want it doesn't mean I can get it. And there's nothing blocking me other than the human's authority. Mom is saying, no, I'm not allowed to be there. So it's a great way to practice developing a little self-control on something you're going to do on a daily basis. We also would not want the dogs to be within 7 feet of the table. So when we do that, and also not be allowed in the kitchen when we're preparing food. Now, what I like to do is I like to help the dogs practice things first in an easy version before we do the real work. And that's kind of what we do at school. We have kids here, and they learn about stuff all week long, and then on Friday they might have a test on the stuff that they do to see how much they learned. So what we can do is sometimes we also have dress rehearsals or practices before we take a swing in a sport or do different things. So we can do the same sort of thing. If we're going to eat a real meal, well, when we're eating, we're shoveling food in our mouth, and then the dog comes up and we're not paying attention, it gets too close. So what we can do instead is, although this house we might need to change a little bit, normally I would say get a piece of bacon and microwave it and put it on the table, and then cut it up into little pieces and put it on everybody's plate. And then we pretend like we're eating. To the dog, it smells like there's food here. And so the dog tries to come close, and then we can correct it and establish that 7-foot boundary around the table. We might want to put painter's tape down on the floor so they know exactly where that line is. And if bacon's not an option, we can also use roast beef or some sort of meat that we microwave that has an aroma. We want it to smell so that way the dog can try to do that. And once the dog sits or lies down beyond the boundary, then we put the meat away and we serve the actual meal. We can do the same sort of thing for the kitchen. We can microwave the piece of roast beef, put it out on the counter, and then, but make sure the dogs are out of the room. And if they try to come in, we march towards them. And then what we do is we can pretend like we're cooking. We turn the stove on so they hear the clicking of the gas going on. We bang some pots and pans around. We open the refrigerator. We take stuff out. We put it in. And we simulate like we're cooking. Because when we're cooking, we're distracted. And then the dog sneaks in. We don't see it right away. Remember, you have that 3 seconds to correct or reward your dog. So once the dog sits or lies down outside the border of the kitchen, look at that, on command, what a smarty pants. Then we would put start the actual meal preparations at that point. We help the dog warm up and practice before we actually do the activity. Let me see, what else? So other rules, the human should eat before the dogs eat. So we want to put the food in the bowls, and we're not going to let the dogs near the bowls. And then the human who's feeding them, who should probably rotate all the members of the family, is going to chew on like a chip or a cracker, a carrot, a piece of celery, something that's going to be crunchy in 5 or more bites. You need a real meal too, that's even better, but it's not always convenient for our schedules. So once I've eaten my chips, then I invite the dog over. Now I'd use passive training to teach each dog. So I would maybe have the kids come up with words. So when Kody eats, maybe we say lasagna. And maybe when Wally eats, maybe we say hot dog or whatever we want to say. And so when he takes his first bite of food for 2 months, we say lasagna. Every time he takes the first bite of food, we only say it once, and we don't say lasagna. We say lasagna in a normal tone of voice. And then we let him eat the rest of his food. After a month, you'll be able to, they'll be practiced at waiting for permission. And instead of having to go tap the bowl, which is what you'll do at first, you'll just say lasagna, and he'll run over and eat. Wally won't eat because Wally's deaf. But if he could hear, he would say, well, lasagna is not my meal. I eat when I hear the word hot dog. Okay, so let me see. What else did we go? And also when you're playing fetch, make him drop the ball before you pick it up and throw it. Once he starts dropping consistently, make him drop the ball and then sit before you pick it up and throw it. So we're going to make him do certain things and calm himself down and slow himself down. He gets really excited when we play fetch. We just throw it as fast as we can. We're helping him practice being excited when he needs practice at being calm. Speaking of which, we can help the dog practice other things by behaviors that we like by using what I call passive training. Passive training is waiting for the dog to do what we want organically without any influence. So every time that he's been LAYing here, I reach over, I pet him and say crash, because that's the word we want to assign. I'm not telling him to crash, I'm just recognizing him for crash. That's a perfect example of it right there. I just wait for the dog to do it. So every time your dog comes to you, pet it and say come or here. Every time it sits, pet it and say sit. Remember, try to pet under the chin and say just the word sit. Try not to say good sit, just sit. And the more that we do this, the more the dog's going to start doing those things because that gets our attention. And that leads me to what I call petting with a purpose. Petting with a purpose is petting the dog with a purpose. Kind of crazy. So what I do is if Kody comes up here and nudges me, he's telling me what to do. If I do it, then that validates that yes, he's in charge of me, then he has to protect me from the other dogs in the neighborhood. So instead, when he nudges me, I give him a counter order. I tell him to sit or down. And then I pet him and say down. Or crash. And whenever possible, try to pet on the chin like we talked about. And then at that point, I can pet him for 9 hours straight. But he has to do something first in order to earn my attention or affection. Now, after a while, what's going to happen is he's a smarty pants. He's going to come up and say, you know what, every time I go to ask David to pet me, he makes me sit first. Maybe I should just sit first to prepay for the attention. Crash. And he's going to come and sit in front of you. When he does, make sure you reach over and pet him and recognize that and say sit or whatever the command word is. And I usually say testify for that. So if mom and dad are watching TV and Kody comes and sits next to him, you can say, Mommy, testify. And then mommy would just reach over and say, crash. So it's just a gentle reminder. Remember to say it respectfully. And then it just helps us remember. Now, for petting with a purpose, I have a word for that. I call it paycheck. Because I think petting our dog is a way we pay them. So if someone comes to the room and sees that I'm petting Kody while he's standing, they might suspect that I forgot to ask him to do something first because he's standing. So they say, paycheck. And if I say, no, you missed it, you didn't see it, then the dog's like, well, they're on their own page. And I can be on my own page too. So if somebody says paycheck, I would stop petting. I would say, sit. When he sits, okay, sit. And I say, I asked him to sit before he came in the room. When you flushed the toilet, he stood up and I continued petting him, which is allowed. So paycheck is just a gentle reminder. I think you may have forgotten to pet with a purpose. Now, even if you want to pet the dog, still ask him to sit or do something to earn it. If he's already sitting here, ask him to come and sit over here or ask him to lay down. If you get in the habit of passively training your dog and using petting with a purpose, every time you pet your dog, it becomes a micro dog training session that you do without even thinking about it. Now, I added my little spin, because we have 2 little ones in the house, on how the kids can earn chocolate, or in this case, Skittles, by doing the right thing. So basically, we're going to have little jars for each child with the child's name on it. And every time the child pets the dog to say thank you, because that's one of the reasons we pet a dog, and they go tell mom and dad, we're going to go take a Skittle and put it in the glass. And then it has to be at least 1 minute more before we can earn another one. So you can't just, I petted, you owe me 4 Skittles, even though it was only 3. You want to make sure that it's at least a minute before. But make sure, even if you want to pet him, that you may ask them to sit. This is going to really help him because he's going to see the humans as asking him to do things, so he's going to see you more as a leader and then feel the less of the need to protect you. Now, I also showed the Guardians a hand targeting exercise. If you forget how to do that, message me. I have videos where I can share with you, show you how to do that. But we really want to try to do that. Karate chop, and make sure you keep your hand at a diagonal and keep it really close to his face at first. There you go. Target. And don't move your hand. So once you karate chop, your hand is frozen. You have to put the treat in your hand, not moving your hand to the treat. And then eventually you can do it further and further and further away. Hey, farty pants. He just farted. And then make him move further and further away from you. But this way you can turn him around by holding your hand and going this way or this way and turn him around rather than physically doing it. Also, we want to make sure that we don't physically push him down, salute. That's what they say in Mexico. And we don't want to push him down into a sit because that's forcing him to it as well. So we want to use that hand motion that I showed you or use a treat. But the more that you salute, I got it first that time. The more that you pet with a purpose and use passive training, the easier it's going to get him to sit. Now, Let me see. We also went over the leadership exercise above, and that's using those 4 escalating consequences. Remember, hiss first. Number 2 is to stand up abruptly, turn to face the dog. Number 3 is to march directly at the dog. Number 4 is to put the dog on a leash timeout. And if you forget about those, let me know, and I'm happy to share those with you. I'm trying to think, is there anything else I'm forgetting? I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot because I cover a lot in a second. Anything you think of? Okay. Well, if you have questions, please don't hesitate. Even though Cameron's a little bit crooked and crock-eyed right now, I'm not. I will help. But make sure you let me know if you have any questions or problems. Please text me. The number I called you from, the 402 number, is the one number. Program that in your phone. If you have any questions, text me there. Text me a picture of him first, Crash, so I can see it, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. I don't care if it's 5 seconds after I walk out this door or 5 years from now. Now, like I said, we'll probably set up a bat session. I'd like the Guardians to really practice all these new rules, enforcement, and the petting with a purpose and all this stuff for the next month. And then we get it, and then really at the end of the year, end of December 1st. So December 31st, call me and let me know how things are going. If things are going great and you don't need it, wonderful. If we need to, we can set up a bat session and work on that, or we can set up a session if the Guardian wants to teach him to walk with a loose leash and stop pulling on the leash and all the rest of that fun stuff. Right, buddy? Yes. So I think that's about it. Well, this is Kody and Wally, who you'll see in the picture at the very top of this, are the Cockers here. And this is their roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it.